Welcome back to Faith Ventures. I'm Dr. Norman Horn, and today I have joining me the eminent James Burkhardt. I'm so glad to have him on the show today. James is a serial entrepreneur who has worked all over the media industry and has helped a lot of Christian artists be successful in the past and is doing all sorts of things now to continue his ministry in so many different ways. He's the managing partner of Burkhardt Media Group, and he even runs a nonprofit called Orphan Heart International. So, James, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you on.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, Norman.
So, as we always like to do in Faith Ventures, this is all about understanding better the careers that people have developed and the types of things that they've done in the context of their faith. So, I want to start off by let's go over some of those career details for you. Where did you kind of start off at, and then how did you become the James Burkhardt of today?
Well, it started when I was about 5 years old. I was very spiritually sensitive at Christmas time. I could really sense the Holy Spirit. And I sang my heart out. And being born in 1954, I could very much identify with the Little Drummer Boy song at Christmas time, amongst other things. But that's when I really began to feel the pull of the Lord into my life, was really literally at 5 years old. And as a result of that, I was seeking God, and He was seeking me, and I had a very good spiritual experience about the age of 8. My parents had quit going to a Methodist church about 4 blocks from our house, and I was taking piano lessons, and my piano teacher happened to be the pianist at First Baptist Church in Elmhurst, Illinois. And a couple of Chicago White Sox used to attend services there. So one morning, I was missing being at church. I got up and walked a little bit over 2 miles to the Baptist church, and went there and caused a bit of a ruckus. But as a result, I was saved a short time later. And that lasted at that church until I was about midway through my 8th grade year, when 2 things happened. The interim pastor, who was the assistant pastor, ran off with his secretary, and sort of thing happens. And I was discouraged by that. But the real blow was when a youth pastor and his wife sat me down and said, you can't play rock and roll and be a Christian.
Oh.
And since I was very much fighting to be a musician most of my life, I was pretty good at piano until I had to quit because my father refused to buy a piano. And by that time, the Beatles were out, and I fell in love with the bass guitar, and the guitar would, ride to department stores where they had a music department, basically near their stereo gear and their record department, and would sit there and play every instrument I could get my hands on before they threw me off the floor. But anyway, so my spiritual journey started at a young age, and I was very committed to the Lord and living a Christian life, and couldn't understand how other people didn't have the same sensibilities towards the Bible and the Christian life and being moral and all that kind of thing. But growing up, I had three great loves. I loved journalism and writing. I loved music, and I loved business. And I found out very early that I could sell, and I was very entrepreneurial. when I got my best new bike at age 10, I put 2 baskets on the rear wheel and went around to all my neighbors and said, I will be happy to go to the store and buy groceries for you if you give me a list and the money, and I'll only charge you 25 cents
Aha.
so that I can buy baseball cards. And that was the first thing I did. And it had a little milk route. But, I just have always been wanting to serve the Lord. And when I got to college, it was kind of a no-brainer that I wanted to have an impact. So I began running a Christian book table in the university center, right next to the communists and the Krishnas and, all sorts of other political groups, and got into some very interesting discussions. Let me put it that way.
I bet.
But I also was able to, work with Campus Crusade on campus. Made arrangements my sophomore year to get a donation of 10,000 Bibles from Dr. Kenneth Taylor, who kind of put together the Living Bible, and it was president of Tyndale House Publishers. And this was in conjunction with a major evangelistic outreach on campus. But the caveat was I could do it, but I had to work with their marketing research department and track Bible reading for the next 2 years, which I did. And later that led to a job offer from Tyndale House to take over one of their struggling Christian bookstores and see what I could do with it. And so I did, and turned it around and made it a success. And had a brief 5-year but very successful career in Christian book selling in the mid 70s to 1980. And at one point, I had written an expansion plan for all the Tyndale bookstores in the city of Chicago and picked out 22 locations, and this expansion plan was presented to the board of directors at Tyndale House. And while they liked the plan, they decided that they had an offer they couldn't refuse from Zondervan Publishers out of Grand Rapids. So they decided to sell the Christian bookstores that they owned. But the caveat, the cool thing is that of all the locations I picked, all but 2 ended up within a block of having a Christian bookstore at that intersection. So that was pretty cool. So that's how I kind of got started, and graduated college in 4 years after switching to a different major and minor midway through my junior year, because my father wanted me to get an accounting and finance degree. And I was pretty well through that midway through my junior year when I decided that really wasn't the career path I wanted to go. I was much more people oriented. Got bored by numbers, but I switched over to marketing and advertising and managed to get graduated in 18 months once I made the change. And that required a lot of extra hard work. And the benefit I got out of that was a strong work ethic that has served me very, very well, because I had to take course overloads for 3 semesters. I had to take all sorts of summer school stuff, and but I made it. But I was certainly studying a lot longer and not partying at all while I was doing that. And that was kind of fun. And one other reward that happened is that when I was about to enter my senior year and getting married that summer. I was actually given the opportunity to manage an 8-unit apartment building up on Greek Row that was owned by a professor, not one of my professors, but a professor had bought this. And of all the people they interviewed, they decided that myself and my fiance at the time, and soon to be my wife, would make the best couple to run the place. So I started out with a lot of management responsibility as a newlywed. And that was always good because I learned how to talk to people and collect money and listen to stories that weren't necessarily true and see through them, but also be compassionate and understanding and work with people. And it was a very harmonious thing. It went exceedingly well. And I just learned that if you learn how to listen to people and try to put yourself in their shoes, it goes a long way, even when you're trying to collect money and or make a sale or all sorts of other applications in life. So then I graduated on a Saturday. I moved on a Sunday and started work in the Tyndale bookshop on Monday in May of 75. Or I'm sorry, May of 76.
Hmm.
And
So not much of a break.
Yep, nope, not much of a break, but yeah, that was kind of my life back then. I multi-interests. I was still playing guitar in church and or bass in church. Still singing. I had formed a duo with another singer, and we were kind of like a Christian version of Simon and Garfunkel because he had a voice. He really did have a voice like our Garfunkel and was quite good. And so I was, a pretty busy guy and very much involved in introducing the Christian bookstores in Chicago to contemporary Christian music, or Jesus music, as it was known back then, because of the Jesus movement that was going on. And that, got me in contact with a lot of concert promoters and festival promoters, record labels, and artists, and that sort of thing. And as a result, I was awarded less than 8 months in the bookstore business. I was awarded the Great Lakes Regional Dealer of the Year by Word Incorporated out of Waco, Texas, which at the time was probably the largest provider of Christian books and records in the country. It was quite an honor, and I'll tell this story. I was the new kid and very kind of aggressive, motivated, and some of the other bookstore managers kind of looked at me askew, and it was interesting. That year, all of the bookstore managers but me got a $1,000 bonus at Christmas. I got $500. Somehow they said, well, he's new. He doesn't deserve it. He shouldn't be paid, but we're paid. But then I got that Dealer of the Year award, and I was awarded a 25-inch console RCA color TV, which was about $500. So I always thought that, the Lord was just kind of looking at me going, okay, they don't appreciate what you're doing, but I do. So here, boom. And that was kind of interesting. And I also had the responsibility of doing advertising for the group of stores. And the first promotion I did, I got 2 phone calls from 2 of the other store managers, and they said, "This is incredible. We got people lined up around the block to get in here. This has never happened." And it's just like, well, with when you've had some really good training in copywriting, and when I was in college, I was educated by Dr. John McNamara, who for a while was president of M&M Mars. And John was overseeing the marketing when they came out with the Melts in Your Mouth, Not in Your Hands ad campaign that a gentleman named Rosser Reeves wrote the copy for. And I was able to study a lot of, Rosser Reeves' creative approach to copywriting and learned a lot as a result of that. There were several other, big names in the ad business that I studied very hard. And that was the benefit of going to night classes. You had people who worked in the city of Chicago in either marketing or advertising for some of the big agencies and or advertisers. And these guys would come out and teach classes at night for, I think, 2 hours or 2.5 hours to classes were. So I made it a point to learn what was really happening in the business world, in the field of marketing and advertising as I could. And since I had to take course overloads anyway, which was usually somewhere between 6 and 7 courses a semester, going to night classes a couple of nights a week made it so that I could take a normal course load during the day and, manage the apartment building and work for a local series of newspapers as an ad salesman in between everything else I was doing. So, like I said, I had a very good work ethic that
yeah, no joke.
the Lord allowed me, and it's just served me well. To me, it's second nature. Some people look at me like I'm trying to show them up, and it's like, no, I'm not. This is who I am. This is how I was made, and it's always kind of set me apart. And I look back on the last 2 years of college when I made that switch, and the kind of discipline I had to apply, and all that, focused, laser focused attention in order just to get through it. And
Right.
incidentally, my grade point average went from like a B minus to an A minus once I made the switch. So that was that was kind of proof in the pudding that I made the right decision. That I was so interested and knowledgeable than just like a fish to water, with the other.
Yeah, it's really interesting how, there's so many interesting lessons to kind of draw from all of what you said thus far. I kind of working our way back for a sec. I have some observations and some things that I kind of want to draw out maybe a little more, and then because I want you to kind of fast forward a little bit and get to some of the other stuff that I know, that some of the really very exciting things that you've done and are continuing to do. But I think that some neat highlights from what you're saying. I like some things I hadn't thought about and just observed on you. Like, number one, it's interesting how when you set forth a major challenge for yourself, such as making this distinct switch and challenging yourself with a rather significant workload, how you can often rise to that challenge so distinctly. And it's pretty interesting to kind of hear you describe that, because I sort of identify with that too, in that, it's often when you have some of the biggest challenges that you set in front of yourself where you have to rise to the occasion or you have to quit. And that's, you don't really have an in between. It's either go hard or go home, period. And so I get that. And to hear that from you is interesting. I also note, I hadn't ever thought about the fact that, if night classes like that actually might bring out some very interesting people, like different people than who would normally be out during the day, your typical college classes like that. So you kind of saying that is like, that's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before, but but I would also suggest is that you should be looking wherever you are toward, kind of look for opportunities to make the most of wherever you find yourself in terms of community, which is just, I mean, again, it just emphasizes that particular point. And it's not saying that, well, everybody should go take night classes, but rather you observed and then you took advantage of an opportunity to learn and to learn more than what you would have just in any given situation. Now you can probably do that in any given, class, day or night, but you just found an interesting way to take advantage of that. I think that's really, admirable. Something that people can kind of, seize upon potentially down the line.
Yeah, well, it helps to know a bit about the professors that you're going to
Yeah, for sure.
entrust your education to before you sign up for their class.
That's true. That's true.
I looked to see, who was who and what was what, because I just didn't, I wanted to be challenged, but I wanted to walk away ready to make it in the big city of Chicago in the advertising world.
Yeah. Well, and that's so neat too, because like I think that so much of these types of industries are somewhat obtuse to us that we just don't. For me at least, being kind of the more in the engineering world, for instance, like some of those things are very like closed veil sort of stuff. You don't hear as much about that, and especially as it pertains to the way in which like you were there for when the kind of rise of Christian music and kind of however for good or for ill, whatever we may think of that. Especially like there's some oddities in that business nowadays, but you were there from the beginning. And I think that's really interesting. And I kind of want to transition a little bit here into you saw this rise of an industry, and so what were some of the things that you observed and learned from the good, the bad, the ugly, in the Christian music industry and that sort of stuff in kind of the 80s and 90s there?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's a part of me that was glad to bring Christian music into the bookstores in the mid 70s like I did. And then I was glad to bring praise music intertwined with contemporary Christian music as a radio station format. And once I was offered a job in LA at a big commercial Christian radio station. And while I was in LA, I worked with, I was good friends with Mike Trout, who went on to be the co-host of Focus on the Family's radio broadcasts with Dr. James Dobson.
Sure.
And the radio station KBRT in Los Angeles was actually one of the catalysts for Dr. Dobson to start his radio show, because he used to come on and be interviewed by our news director, Rich Bueller, quite a bit. And when Rich didn't do it, Trout did it. But they did a call-in talk show over the lunch hour where, they'd have a theologian or someone like Dr. Dobson on, and, the audience could participate and call in with solutions to some of the problems that other people might have, or the questions that Dr. Dobson would raise, just asking, the body of Christ what they thought about this, or how they would solve that, or what they thought was important for the family. And it was a really good example to me of how radio can be interactive, where the host can be more of the facilitator. The guest or the call-in person could be asking for ministry. and someone from the audience could call in and deliver the solution or the ministry to that person. That happened quite frequently. It was just neat how I saw that God could use Christian radio and the interactivity of radio to really bless people. And that made an indelible mark on me. And as we went from LA back to Chicago, when I was in Los Angeles, I was a salesperson again, an account executive with my territory was Orange County, which, had Disneyland. They were one of my clients when they did their contemporary Christian music nights.
Sure.
Knott's Berry Farm, a lot of the more progressive Christian bookstores in the country, Maranatha Village being one of them. A lot of those places, Bob Siemens Christian Jewelry was one of my accounts. And working with, just a whole ton of people like that, it was very good. And at the time, I was going to Calvary Chapel in Yorba Linda that was being led by John Wimber as the lead pastor. And he, very shortly thereafter, began the Vineyard. And
yeah.
I've had a lot of good men of God speak into my life. And John Wimber was one of them.
Huh.
The year I was in LA, he was my pastor. It was amazing because the sales manager for Maranatha Music, a guy named Ted Blameyer, who's not with us any longer, but he took me aside once when I got out there because I had to wait for my house to sell back in Illinois before my wife and young son could join me. So I was batching it. He took me aside like the second weekend I was there and said, "Hey, my wife and I want to take you to church Sunday and then we'll go out to brunch." And that was my first exposure to John Wimber. And man, his teaching was really spot on as far as I was concerned, because I was very much into the Word of God and Leonard Ravenhill and Keith Green and a lot of those people that were calling for a deeper discipleship, just like there's a call for the ecclesia in the American church today to rise up and speak out against all manner of evil and not compromise in their life with what the Bible says. It even though, that was 1980 was 44 years ago. It's the thing, the circle is going around again, and we're kind of in the same situation. Even though in the 80s it was, the Jesus movement was waning and the rise of the evangelical church and the evangelical was happening. There was lots of very good things going on, but still there was the counterculture with the hippies and if it feels good, do it, and all sorts of other compromising kind of slogans, that were apparent and also part of the drug culture that was growing up at that point. But anyway, Wimber had a big impact on me. And it was when I was driving back from LA to the Chicago area. And the Lord just kind of spoke to me and said, "Hey, I want you to take praise music and integrate it with a good kind of top 40 format." And the music is there and the praise music is there. And I want you to apply, I believe it's Psalm 22, where it says, "God inhabits the praises of his people." And that way, my spirit will go out over the radio waves. And it'll be something new. And this is what I want you to do when you get to Chicago, because I was hired once again to take over a struggling enterprise. Seems to be my forte, but it was a good thing that I moved, and it was one of the first experiences where I really felt the Bible guiding me to go against what I wanted and do what would be best for my wife and family. My wife didn't, I flourished in Southern California. My wife suffered. She felt isolated. She didn't make any friends. She loved all the attention and the high profile stuff. You know, I could get tickets to Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm just by picking up the phone. You know, people came out to visit or whatever. But at that time, right about the time she conceived twins, is when the Lord began to speak to me about, you may want to move back towards grandma and grandpa, because my parents and her parents were both, you know, probably 10 miles apart back in the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, you put this desire for me to go to California, and it's, I don't want to leave. I'm having great success and this, that, and the other thing. And one of my radio mentors was a gentleman named Bill Wade. And he was one of the top jocks during the 60s in the British invasion for KHJ AM radio in Los Angeles, which was a major station, kind of like WLS in Chicago, or, you know, some of the big stations in New York City. I mean, it was one of those premier things. And he sat me down, and, you know, he used to sit with me and tell me how radio worked. And because I really wanted to know how successful radio worked. I didn't care if it was secular or whatever, because I just wanted, if I was going to do it, I wanted to do it well. And he told me, he says, look, Jim, the opportunity to go from an account executive to a general manager doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't matter that you're going from this huge 10,000 watt AM station that covers 3 states and everything to an FM station, a 3,000 watt FM station in the suburbs of Chicago. If it's the right 3,000 watts, it'll have a big impact. And that's what you want to do. He says, you're going to be successful no matter what you do. If you stay, you'll be successful, but your family will be miserable. And, you know, that's not a good situation. But if you go back, your wife will be happy. You'll have this promotion, and it'll be better for you, even though it appears that it's a step backwards. And he says, take it. You know, and as a matter of fact, he was the one who came in with the blind dad in a radio periodical and said, I got to show you this. And then he sat there and told me why I should do it. So it was, you know, one of those situations where you've got a good relationship with your boss, and he's become a mentor, and, you know what, he knows what you're capable of doing, even though you're kind of a novice in the industry, and he just pushes you and says, okay, here, go for it. And then when the Lord kind of confirmed that I should go for it, I did. And what was interesting is on the plane ride from LA to Chicago for the initial interview, I wrote down 5 things that were kind of like my fleece. Well, Lord, this is what I'd like here, 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 and here. And if they offer it to me, I'll know it's from you. Well, once you know it, in the first 5 minutes, he said, I'm going to cut to the chase. We'll give you this, 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 and this. And that matched up perfectly with my list. And my jaw went, I was just flabbergasted. But it was just one of those things where, the Lord is in it. And, there's a situation where if you surrender to what the Lord is telling you to do, even though every fiber of your flesh in your being doesn't want to do it, it's better to obey than to sacrifice, as the old song would go. So that's what I did, and that kicked off a very interesting career in radio. WCRM FM in the suburbs of Chicago had quite an impact on the industry, both with praise music and with the fact that we had a very quality sound, on-air sound, and I was very good at selecting DJs and attracting the right kind of talent and that sort of thing. Yeah, many opportunities to cross over into some secular advertisers on a Christian station was unheard of at the time. And I knew a lot about marketing research and audience research and what ad agencies wanted to see. So I created something called a WCRM bonus card, which was really a discount card. And we had a 3-panel brochure, very similar to like a American Express questionnaire that you'd fill out, except we had a lot of psychographic questions and demographic questions, not so much about, financial data, but it was more the kind of stuff that I could go to an ad agency or the marketing department of a secular advertiser and make an intelligent presentation. And it was all tabulated independently of the radio station. So it was very legitimate. And we were very successful at using that with some major agencies in Chicago and some major advertisers. And that was one of the things that when it was time for me to leave WCRM, because I had been promoted to an executive vice president. I went there as a general manager. They made me vice president and general manager shortly thereafter, about a year later, after I proved myself. And then about 6 months after that, they said, my boss came to me and said, I want to put you on the road. Says, I want you to take your knowledge in sales and go train and look at the other markets where we're at. And the reason for that is that we were owned by AMG Publishers, which was Dr. Spiro Psodiatis. And one of his big things was to serve orphans and lepers in India and a couple of other countries, but mostly India. And the purpose of having the broadcast division was to become extremely profitable so that they didn't have to depend on donor dollars to take care of the leper hospitals that they had and feeding orphans and things of that nature. And then as the stations became more profitable, they would attract buyers who wanted the property because they could see, oh, this is good. This is something. And then they'd make a big profit. when they'd sell the station, and that would go into the coffers and help the ministry even more. So, for instance, WCRM, they bought it for $300,000, and they were having a hard time paying the quarterly note when they brought me in. And he said, "We'll give you 6 months. If you don't do it, and by the way, you've got to take care of this note above and beyond your operating expenses every quarter." And it was fairly significant. But anyway, by the time I was done, that station sold for just under $1 million. So they spent $300,000 on it. They made a profit from the sale of $600,000 on it, plus all the profit I made for the 5 years that I ran it. So it was very good, and I was able to go from the position of just running a station. And to tell you the truth, when they put me on the road, and I proved myself, because every time I went into a market, whether it was Columbus, Georgia, just outside Atlanta, or Charleston, West Virginia, or Jacksonville, Florida, or wherever we had the stations, the sales went up the next 30 days. And every time I would go back, there'd be an increase in sales, because the Lord was blessing what I was doing, and I was just sharing what I knew, and learned a lot about different markets and different people and all sorts of things. But quite frankly, after 2.5 years of being on the road, probably 10 days out of every month, plus having the responsibility of running this other station myself, I burned out. And my wife came to me and said, "I don't want you to go on the road anymore." And I went, "Well, the last time I did what you wanted me to do, it worked out really well." I asked to be removed from the executive vice president role, which I should have never have done in hindsight, and I would never advise anyone to do it. I should have done something else. I had the opportunity to move into the home office, but my wife didn't want to move. The home office was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but she didn't want to go there. But I probably should have done something where I could have accommodated that and cut down the road travel and had the managers travel to me. There could have been a lot of different ways to do it, but I was so burned out I couldn't think straight, and it was just too bad. So they brought in another guy, and because he figured I was his competition, he found a way to get rid of me. There wasn't just a political firing. It happens all the time, especially in the media business. So the Lord opened up a door for me at the number 7 station, secular station in Chicago. So I'm one of the few Christian broadcasters that have successfully made a transition into the secular world of broadcast. And it was great. I got to walk up and down Michigan Avenue, in and out of every major advertising agency, J. Walter Thompson. There's a whole slew of them down on Michigan Avenue, and on Randolph Street, where the station was located. Leo Burnett, those are two of them. McKay and Erickson. Those are all top ad agencies. And
so let's kind of, as we begin to kind of I don't want to respect your time because I know we have just a little bit left, but I do want you to kind of move a little bit toward. You've done just a tremendous amount of stuff in this media business, and now you're even you've been an entrepreneur now for some time,
Right.
and you're starting up a major kind of project here
Yeah.
that's taking a different approach in many respects toward Christian broadcasting. And so I
Right.
hope you'll describe kind of like what was your motivation for starting it? What is it exactly? And
Okay.
what can people do to kind of observe how it's building up?
Right. Well, to back up just a bit, in 2007, I had been an entrepreneur in the city of Chicago and ran a telemarketing company. It was started out as a marketing company and turned into a big telemarketing company. I worked with most all of the major ministries in the country at one point in time or another.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I decided to pursue my love of music and started a musical tutorship company in the suburbs of Chicago while I was taking care of my ailing mother and father-in-law. And both of them passed in 1999, and I kind of put the telemarketing company on ice at the end of 96 so that I could take care of them for a couple of years before they passed. And while I did that, I was teaching music, becoming much more involved in the music business, pursued a degree at Berklee College of Music, being able to study online. And I learned recording techniques from Pro Tools. And as a result of that, I was able to go to Orlando and do an internship as a mastering engineer with one of the top mastering engineers in the world, a guy named Bob Katz. And right around that time, my wife started having heart troubles. So I jumped back into radio. I had gotten all the courses done and had a degree in music business and Pro Tools production. Jumped into radio. I ended up getting hired by Salem Media. And during the course of working in talk radio, the Lord began to tell me to put together a format called Spirit and Truth Radio, SNT Radio, and to take the last 40 years of music, which goes all the way back to the Jesus Revolution or the Jesus movement, and put together this music, because no one in 2007 was even thinking about music before Y2K, before 2000. The 80s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s were like passe. We don't care. But I knew there was a whole bunch of people, baby boomers and others, kids of baby boomers that had to listen to it with their parents growing up, that were still interested in it. So I put together this format, S&T Radio. And then my wife comes to me one day, about 3 months into it, and I was doing it as a syndicated radio broadcast. She said, "I think the Lord told me last night to tell you to put it on the internet." So that's what I did. 2008, I jumped into it and created this thing where I could go 24/7, 365 days, with a huge swatch of music, and it was streaming. And I was one of the first to actually put together a full-time internet-only radio station, which is still on the air now. You go to sntradio.com and you'll be able to hear 45 years of the greatest Christian music, even though we still say it's playing 4 decades. And that has got me involved in streaming for the last 15 years, going on 16 now. And about 3 years ago, I was very much interested in video. I've always been interested in video ever since I was producing TV commercials, going back into the 70s and 80s and 90s. Because when I worked with Tyndale House and the radio stations, we had TV commercials. And then when I formed my first marketing company that turned into the telemarketing company, we would produce TV commercials and infomercials for different products and businesses and that sort of thing. So about 3 years ago, I got an idea for something called SNTV. And I've always been a news junkie. I've always been involved in journalism. When it was time to go to college, I could have gone to the University of Missouri in Columbia, which is one of the top journalism schools in the country. I could have gone to Berkeley or a couple of other music colleges, or I could go to a good business school, which I did. I decided that music was going to be my hobby. And, as Duke Ellington said, music is my mistress. And so I pursued business full time because I figured I could make a good living at it. And if I could figure out a way to use journalism, which is either PR or hard news or something like that, I would do it. So to come straight to the point, SNTV is going to be a streaming news, truth, and values platform where independent podcasters can become part of a portal that will be promoted and act like a network. And we're following the we're following the Naval Watch schedule. First watch is 2 to 7. Second watch is 7 to noon. Third watch is noon to 5. And what we're planning on doing in there is creating, during those 15 hours of the day, Monday through Friday, I want to put together a really good, solid hour of headline news, not half an hour like CNN started to do. They would cycle through the news twice an hour. I want to do it once an hour. And then in prime time, the fourth watch is 5 to 10. And then the fifth watch is 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Well, from that 5 to 10 p.m., we're considering that prime time. Now, I'm in the East Coast. 5 p.m. is not prime time anywhere else. But if I set this broadcasting cycle up on Pacific time, 5 p.m. is 8 p.m. Eastern, it's 7 p.m. Central, and it's 6 p.m. Mountain. And it's 5 p.m. Pacific time. So I can go from 5 p.m. Pacific time to 10 p.m. Pacific time, which would end up being 1 a.m. on the East Coast. and run some really good big name podcasters. And then from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. during that fifth watch is I'm going to run something that is going to counter program Caravan to Midnight or the All Night Trucker Show or some of those things that have been very popular overnight. Because from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. Eastern, then midnight to 4 Central, you're in that area where you can run some very interesting and creative programming. And then on Saturday, we want to put all sorts of really good family-oriented kind of programs, some teaching. We're also going to, like I love the culinary arts. There's sports, there's all sorts of different things. And then Sunday, we want to run some news, some Christian programming, but not like you normally see. So it would be unique and different. And also have a positive magazine kind of approach like Charles Corral used to do on the CBS Saturday morning or CBS Sunday morning, where they present the news, but it's in a brighter kind of positive way. And I know this is going back old school kind of stuff compared to what they're doing now with their woke and their radical political agendas on the mainstream media. But this is going to be something that I think people around the world will be interested to tie in, because one of the benefits of being president of an international education and training and awareness building orphan care and teaching people what orphans go through as victims of an orphaned heart or an orphaned spirit. I've come into contact with people all over the world and have gotten much more culturally in tune with the real heart of people. They want to experience love. They want to experience acceptance. They want to experience empowerment, where they have the ability to lead a productive life, but lead a life that is built on freedom. And there's still a lot of places in the world where, people aren't free to think. They're told what to do, what kind of jobs to have, all that kind of stuff. It's total control. And there's this push right now where there's going to be more attempts at that. And I want to put together this streaming portal where a lot of independent people who have good vision and good heart and good morals and good ethics could be given a platform to speak. Now, yes, it's going to be a website, but a long time ago, when I was looking to do a Christian version of MTV, I got a Twitch channel, I got a Roku channel, I got a Vimeo channel, I believe I've got a Rumble channel, and we can be delivered video through the Glory Star satellite, because sntradio.com is already carried by Glory Star satellite, which is Seventh-day Adventist, and it feeds a lot of the Seventh-day Adventist hospitals or Adventist health care system hospitals.
Sure.
So it's not just going to be something that's going to be put through a website. It's going to be put through multiple platforms worldwide, through the internet, through satellite, and should be able to achieve very much a worldwide audience, because it's going to be a world, but a Christian worldview portal. And we're not going to be like YouTube and censor people, but we're going to be careful who we put out on prime time and on the weekends. And the news is going to be done using a lot of citizen journalists out there with cell phones, mobile phones that can, shoot footage, and then we can put it into a news center where an editor can look at it and decide what to use and what not to use, and we'll reward those people for submitting news stories. But we'll also share the revenue we get from advertisers with each one of the podcasters based on the number of commercials that we are able to sell. So it's a much better platform than YouTube as far as rewarding podcasters. And a lot of podcasters that we would want to hear have been already banned off YouTube anyway. So, but since we will be very generous in the way that we're sharing revenue with them, they can afford to get a better studio and produce better programming than what they've been able to do just trying to survive off a website or off YouTube or something like that. And it's a divine design, because I've sat on this waiting on the Lord for the go-ahead to do it. I've had it for 3 years on paper. And finally, earlier or late last year, the Lord kind of said, okay, the world is ready for this. The intellectual battle that's going on, the information, the disinformation, the misinformation from mainstream media, it's time that you put this thing together. So I'm letting the cat out of the bag with this much detail, Norm, on Faith Ventures, because SNTV truly is a faith venture. So
I certainly appreciate that. And
you got the scoop.
Yeah, we got the scoop. You heard it here first, folks. Well, we are thankful for that you would trust us with that. And I hope that, no matter what, whether, we've talked a little bit about what, LCI might be able to do with you. And no matter what happens, we do wish you great success with that. And, for the glory of the kingdom. And so we're thankful. It is amazing to kind of hear through, so much of your story, just the way in which God prepares us to do, more and more things for his kingdom throughout our lives, and who knows where it all leads. In a similar fashion, like what I do as a scientist, the things I'm doing now weren't possible except for the things that I've done in my past. And so the Lord uses our past in order to accomplish bigger and better things. And I think that's a good lesson for those of us, those folks who are starting off, that there are opportunities that we have, and we might think, oh, well, I need to be doing the best thing in my life now, and that's it. As if that, accomplish one thing now, and then the rest of your life is coasting or something like that. And that's not really the case. I think you're a great example of a person who, has taken all of their experiences, kept building, kept working, kept the faith, and then, ultimately are doing, just useful things for the kingdom all throughout life. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you for sharing all of this with us.
It's my pleasure. And all the glory goes to God.
Amen. Well, we've spent a good bit of time here talking today, and I'm again just thankful that you would join us to let us know and just kind of just walk us through your story, which is just fascinating, and I appreciate you being so open doing that. we'll probably do some selective bit for our podcast, but we will make sure that the full interview is posted on YouTube for certain. And so, James, once again, I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been very much a pleasure. Thanks.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and I just want to plug everyone to go check out orphanedheart.org.
That's right. Yeah, orphanedheart.org, and then also sntv.com. Is that right again?
Well, it's not. It's sntradio.tv.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sntradio.tv.
It's like I said, it's being developed.
Yeah.
Right.
So
now,
stay tuned.
Everything, but
and then
the trade name will be SNTV.
Right. And then there's also the BurkhartMediaGroup.com if you want to see more about James and the things that he does, if even his consulting services and whatnot. So from all of us at LCIDU, we thank you once again, James, for being here. And we encourage all of our listeners to check out what James is doing in all of his various things that we've been talking about here. And so until next time, we're very thankful for you listening.